Welcome to another edition of Camp Countdown presented by Connors and Ferris. I'm Chris Brown along with Maddy Glab, and our discussion heading into training camp here concerns the tight end position and whether Dawson Knox and free agent signee O.J. Howard will be double trouble for Bills' opponents. Maddy, this seems like a simple question on the surface, but it's got some layers to it, the first of which is the unknown as to what Ken Dorsey's plans for the offense are this season and how these tight ends factor in.
Yeah, you would think tight ends are going to play an important role in the offense just because of Dawson Knox's season last year, where he scored 9 touchdowns and almost had 50 receptions for more than 500 yards. I mean, Knox was a big target for Allen, especially in the end zone because of his size, but there's someone else in the mix now who also brings size to the tight end position, and that's O.J. Howard. I'm really intrigued to see how Dorsey uses both Howard and Knox separately and together, but just on surface level, you think that they have to play a part.
Right, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ken Dorsey is waiting on maybe a little bit more evidence from Howard himself in the training camp setting when the pads go on. I think he might have to do a little bit of convincing the offensive staff that he can be a factor. How does he fit into certain play calls? Hey, we think this will work for OJ, but let's see it on the field, in camp, and maybe even in the preseason before we put our stamp of approval on it. That brings us to part 2 of our discussion, which is what can O.J. Howard offer the Bills in the passing game? We know he's a giant target, but how diverse is his receiving game?
Well, he stands tall at 6'6", so number one, that's an obvious mismatch in a lot of ways. And when you look at his receiving game, you have to remember his college years. He was the College Football National Championship MVP in 2015 for those receiving skills, which helped him be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft. And in his first 2 NFL seasons, he scored 11 touchdowns and had close to 1,000 receiving yards. The last couple seasons haven't been as exciting, though, because of a couple injuries. Injuries aside, though, Howard has the skills as a receiver, and if he can stay healthy this season, fingers crossed he can, it should be fun to watch him.
Right, and health is the big thing here. I mean, the torn Achilles he suffered in week 4 of the 2020 season led to a long rehabilitation. Even last August, he said he didn't feel himself yet. Now, almost 2 years removed from that injury, has the explosiveness returned? I think that's what everybody's going to be looking for in the training camp setting. And if it is back, we're really talking about a special weapon here. You know, if not, he might just be a physical red zone type of presence. So what if he proves to be athletically in training camp figures to largely determine his role here. I mean, if he's got everything back that you pointed out that he had in college, they could really have something here in terms of a dynamic duo.
Yeah, I think there's a role in this offense for Howard if he shows how he can be available and put some tape together during training camp, right? There's competitions all over the place in training camp. I don't know if tight end is necessarily competition Knox against Howard. I think it's more, can Howard put that tape together to prove that he deserves a role? And we've talked about it several times already. Imagine Howard and Knox together in this offense with Dorsey's mind, with how he's going to play call 12 personnel, 13 personnel. I mean, the things that you can do and the way you can twist things, the mismatches that you can have on this offense if you're utilizing both of these, I think is scary for opposing defenses. So to have another big tight end who also doubles as a receiver, I think is big and could play big into different moments and against different opponents. So Ken Dorsey could have a ball with these two as a first season offensive coordinator here in Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, if the Howard explosiveness is there, it gives Dorsey more opportunities to be unpredictable with how he calls this offense. And I think what you said is important. It's not necessarily Knox is 1 and Howard is 2. It's kind of more of a 1 and 1A thing. And I think everybody knows that Dawson Knox is kind of the entrenched starter. If there's only one tight end on the field, it's going to be Knox. But what Howard can show through the training camp and preseason setting could largely determine how often we might see 2 tight ends on the field instead of 1. So we look at Dawson Knox, we say he's number 1. What does that mean, I guess, for him going into this season, coming off a 9-touchdown campaign last year?
I think he needs to take that next step. We talk about taking the next step for a lot of these players on this offense, but I think that's what the staff is charging Dawson Knox with. I mean, with what he did last season, with what he's put on film, with the mismatch that he has been in previous seasons, with what he's continuing to do this off season, working with that vision specialist that he has now a couple years, and how it's really helped him, I think, on the field we saw last season, is that, hey, it's time to show up again. And do what you did last season. Now, we'll see what defenses have on Dawson Knox, because I would expect it's going to be a little bit harder for him this season. But I think it's time for him to shine. But when you look at the offense as a whole, there's a lot of mouths to feed. There's James Cook, there's Jameson Crowder, who I think are definitely going to get the ball this season. And, of course, there's a guy in Isaiah McKenzie who I think is ready for a bigger role on this offense. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But I do expect Dawson Knox to play an important role this season, because he needs to.
And if you look at it, if O.J. Howard comes forward and steps to the forefront with a full complement of athletic ability, again, that explosiveness, if that returns, that means that Ken Dorsey has a good problem. It's a good dilemma to have, because it's just another weapon, along with all the ones that you just listed, Maddy, that he can choose from. And some might be better options in a given week against a given opponent than others. So if he has a full complement of that, it allows him to stay ahead of the curve and stay ahead of opposing defenses. Stay tuned to BuffaloBills.com and to One Bills Live for all your training camp updates. For now, I'm Chris Brown for Maddy Glab.